Let's look at some characteristics of imperfects. So we have our 7 basic stems. We have the cal, nifal, piel, pual, hithpael, hifil, and hofal. Let's briefly review what those are. So our cal is called the simple or the base stem. Cal actually means light. The nifal often will be the passive. If the cal has a form for a particular root, and the nifal also has a form for that root, the nifal will often be passive. If the cal would be active, the nifal would be passive. Now cal is often active. We'll call this active, although it does have a lot of examples of statives, like I am something, I am heavy, I am light. There's also some that are just by their nature passive. The piel, pual, and hithpael are called the intensives. That's quite a broad generalization. Intensive can mean all sorts of things. It can mean intense in emphasis, it can mean intense in time, like over a long period of time, perhaps repetition. So the idea of intensive is a very general category, and it varies greatly depending on the meaning of the root and the context. And then finally we have the hifil and hofal. These are our causatives. So in terms of active and passive, we have the piel would be active intensive, the pual would be passive intensive, the hithpael would be reflexive intensive, and in the causatives, the hifil would be active causative and the hofal would be passive causative. So as an example of causative, the root ra'ah, so resh aleph hey, in the cal means to see, but over here in the hifil it means to show or cause to see. So to cause to see would be to show. There's an example of a root that has a form in the cal, also has a form in the hifil, and we see this causative idea. Now we take a look at some of the characteristics of imperfects. I've got 7 listed here. The first is the prefix, and I've got a few examples down at the bottom of the page here. So notice that for yiktol, the prefix is a yod. For this example here, tiktol now, the prefix is a tau. And then for third masculine plural, we see another yod. So there are 4 potential prefixes, and they will not change. So our prefixes are yod, as you've seen, tau, aleph, and nun. Those are the only prefixes you will see for imperfects. We looked at the prefix, now we'll look at the prefix vowel. Notice that for the cal form, the prefix vowel is a heroic. And notice that that is the same for all of these forms. And in fact, as we look at the complete list, we'll see that except for one where there's a guttural that decides it wants a different vowel, mainly it's heroic is our prefix vowel. Then we check our first root letter, R1 for doubling. And that would be right here for this one, the kof. So our root is kof, tet, lamed, and that's 1, 2, 3. And so we look at the R1, which is this kof, and there's no doubling, so that's a non-issue. And I'm listing these out here for the cal column here. So the prefix vowel, hearic, R1 doubling no. The R1 vowel, we see here it is a silent schwa. And that's pretty invariant. Occasionally for certain weak verbs, that will be a vocal schwa. So it'll be a schwa in any case, but it's usually a silent schwa. The next thing we look at is R2 doubling, and there is no doubling, so we can just put a no there and move on. The R2 vowel, we call that the theme vowel. It is a holum. That's true for both of these forms. Note that for the cases where we have a vowel letter only as the suffix, this reduces to a vocal schwa. But if the theme vowel is a full vowel, it will often be a holum. Now sometimes the theme vowel will be a patach, particularly for weak verbs if there's a guttural there, either in the R2 or the R3 position. And occasionally for certain stative verbs, you'll see a patach for the R2 vowel. But for general purposes, we can say that for the cal form, we are looking at a holum. And then the suffixes. Along with the prefix, the suffix tells us the person, gender, and number of the verb. So what I want to point out here is that we determine the stem really based on these characteristics 2 through 6. And we determine the person, number, and gender based on 1 and 7. So prefix, suffix is what we pay attention to once we know the stem. So we use the 2 through 6 to figure out the stem. Then we use the prefix and the suffix to figure out person, number, gender. So let's take a look at our cal imperfects. Notice our prefixes, yod, yod, and yod. A yod will always be a masculine form. So third masculine singular, third masculine plural, second masculine plural. The second prefix is a tau. We see tau here in third feminine singular, second masculine singular. Those forms are actually the same. Second feminine singular, and then third feminine plural, and second feminine plural. A lot of these forms have a tau. And then we have the first common singular. That's got an aleph, and the first common plural's got a noon. Looking at the prefix vowel, note that it is hearic everywhere, except for the first common singular. The aleph doesn't like a hearic, so it takes a E-class vowel, the short E, sagol. But otherwise we can see that we have these nice regular hearics as our prefix vowels. Again, we see the R1 vowel is a silent schwa, and that's uniform across all of them. And then the theme vowel, the R2 vowel, is a holum, except in the few places where we have a vowel letter as a suffix. And then it reduces to a vocal schwa. Finally, let's look at the suffixes. In many cases there is no suffix, so in 5 of the cases we see no suffix. And then we see second feminine singular has a hearic yod for its suffix. The third masculine plural has a shurek, and that is also true for the second masculine plural. They have shurek. Then the third feminine plural has a na, and that matches the second feminine plural, which is a na. Actually, the forms are identical. So third feminine plural and second feminine plural, the forms are the same. They both have that na ending, the noon with the commas hey. So that is what our cal imperfects look like. Once we know it's a cal stem, then we pay attention to the prefix and the suffix to figure out the person, the gender, and the number. We're going to be looking at chapter 15 of the Basics of Biblical Hebrew Workbook, and this is by Gary Pratico and Miles Van Pelt. And we'll also be looking at the Basics of Biblical Hebrew Grammar. And here is the bibliographical information for both of those. We'll be looking mostly at the workbook, but we will also have occasion to go back and look at the grammar as well. So we are in chapter 15 of the workbook, and I want to go through a few of these parsing exercises of imperfects, just to go through some of the basics of parsing imperfect verbs. The chart for that is found in the grammar, and that is located here in section 15.3. Here is the basic paradigm, and the red shows the prefixes, and this imperfect is also called the prefix conjugation, and in a few cases there are suffixes as well, but the imperfect is characterized by prefixes because every form has a prefix. So remember that this chart shows the imperfect forms for the cal imperfect. So these are the forms for the cal imperfect. And let's review briefly the vowels for the cal imperfect. So the prefix vowels are going to be heuric. So we see the prefix vowel here, heuric. The only exception is for the first common singular, where we have a segol. And all the rest of them are going to be heuric. So for the cal stem, that heuric prefix vowel is pretty standard. You find it across the strong verbs and most of the weak verbs as well. Now let's take a look at the R1 vowel. So R1 is going to be the kof in our root katal. And the R1 vowel is going to be this silent schwa. Technically maybe not a vowel, but it's easier just to talk about the R1 vowel in general. So the silent schwa, we'll see that all the way down. We see that all the way down the chart. Then we can look briefly at the R2 vowel, or the theme vowel, and that is going to be a holum, and that's true for many cal strong verbs. Some cal strong verbs have a patak, but most, or many at least, have a holum. And then our exception in this chart will be these verbs that have a vowel letter as a suffix. So we have the second feminine singular, it's got that heuric yod. The third masculine plural, it's got the shurek. And the second masculine plural, it's also got a shurek. So in these cases, the theme vowel is a vocal schwa. So we see that for second feminine singular, we see it for third masculine plural, and for second masculine plural. And so for second feminine singular, we've got tiktali, third masculine plural, yiktalu, second masculine plural, tiktalu. And that R2 vowel reduces because of this vowel letter that's added at the end. Otherwise, our R2 vowel is a holum for many of our cal strong verbs. So coming over to the exercises, we have our first word here, which is Tim Carew. Tim Carew. Sounds almost like a Mary Poppins song. I guess that was Chim Chim Charu, but this is Tim Carew. So if we compare that to our chart, we'll see that that looks a lot like the second masculine plural here, the Tiktalu. So a tau at the beginning and a shurik at the end. So again, tau at the beginning, there's our prefix, and our suffix is a shurik. So this is going to be a cal, and I guess every one of these is going to be a cal, but let me go ahead and complete this now. So we're going to have a cal, and this is going to then be an imperfect. I'll just do IMPF. And person, gender, number, we saw from the chart that was second masculine plural. And the verbal root here is mame, calf, resh. And we can write that as MKR, makar, if we don't have the Hebrew, the ability to write Hebrew. So, and that works fine. Makar means he sold, to sell. So this would be second masculine plural. You all will sell. The first time we see that verb in the Hebrew Bible is in Genesis 25:31, where Jacob says to Esau, "Sell me your birthright now." And so it appears pretty early. Okay, the second one here is you're dof. You're dof. Now I can compare that to my chart, and that looks a lot like this one right here, yiktol. So my third masculine singular, yiktol. As you begin to learn these, then you will not need to come back and look at this chart every time. So we'll get rid of this and come back. We've got yirdof, we've got that yod prefix and no suffix. So we can parse this as cal imperfect. These are all going to be cal imperfect. So I'm not sure I have to keep writing those out. This is going to be third masculine singular, and our root is radaf, or radaf, the P, but it's a pay. And so I would pronounce it radaf, even though our three root letters are resh, dalet, and pay. So either one, if I were to write that out, it would be resh, dalet with a hard right angle, and then a final pay, radaf. This one here would be makar, so mame, calf, resh. So that's how I'd write them out, but you can, if you don't have the Hebrew characters, that's fine, just to use your keyboard and type them out in English. All right, let's look at the next one here. We have tick boats. Tick boats. So we have this tav prefix, no suffix, and then our root letters are kof, bait, sade. So it's kavatz, which means to collect or gather. And so again, cal imperfect, we don't need to write those out. With the tau as the prefix, now let me go back and look at the chart one more time. We've got both, so tau prefix, no suffix. We've got both third feminine singular or second masculine singular. And context will tell us which one of those is true. So I will put them both down. I have third feminine singular or second masculine singular. With an exercise like this, it could be either one. In context, we will know which of these two it is normally. And then we've got kavatz, so it's kof, bait, and sade. If I was going to write that out, I'd say Q, B, and then TS, kavats, like that. Pronounce it kavats, but I guess I can make this a little bit more connected. There we go, with a cove coming below the line. All right, that doesn't look great, but it's kavats in any case. So kavats is our root. All right, number 4 is going to be the same as number 1 in terms of its parsing. It'd be a different root. It'll be karat. We've got tikratu, or perhaps tichratu. This calf does not have a dagesh, so maybe more accurately tichratu. It's harder to say. Here we have a prefix, a tau prefix, and we also have a shuric ending. And then our root here would be karat, kaf, resh, tau. So we can look at our chart and note that this looks a lot like 2MP. In fact, it looks exactly like 2MP. So we have tav prefix, shuric ending, and so we know it's second masculine plural, imperfect. And we'll come back then. Tichratu, so cal, imperfect. And then this was a second masculine plural. And our root is kaf, resh, tau.
Karat, to cut.
Previous one, kavats, to gather. Third feminine singular would be she will gather. Second masculine singular, you will gather. The default translation for this is going to be future, but in context it could be present, it could be future, sometimes even past, but the default, I'll just make them future. And so this one, cal imperfect, second masculine plural.
To cut, so you masculine plural will cut.
Okay, yishmeru, our next one here. Again, notice we have a yod prefix and a shuric ending. Now we noted before that the third masculine plural and the second masculine plural are very similar except for the prefix. So tikratu would be second masculine plural. Yishmeru, very similar except you've got the yod at the beginning. This is going to be third masculine plural. Different root, but the shuric at the end is telling you that it is a masculine plural. The tau is telling you it's second masculine plural, and the yod is telling you it's third masculine plural. So those aren't too difficult. Again, cal, imperfect, they're all cal imperfect. I guess I don't need to keep writing those. This is going to be third masculine plural, and our root here is shamar, so sheen, mame, and resh, and that is to keep. And so we have third masculine plural, they, masculine, will keep, or they will guard. Okay, let's go to number 6 here. This is a new one that we haven't encountered yet in these exercises. So we have a prefix of noon, so that's nishmor, and no suffix, and shamar is our root. So we'll just cal imperfect, we don't need to write those out. And then we have a first common plural. I can go back over to our chart, and again, you'll begin to learn these, but first common plural, we see the noon prefix, no ending, so in this case, niktol, that's the paradigm, but we come back over to number 6 here, nishmor, so that's a first common plural, and our root is shamar again. Actually, it's the same as what we had for the one above it. sheen, meme, resh, shamar. And that would be we will guard, we will keep. Okay, number 7, that's going to look a lot like number 5, so I'm just going to let that one go for the time being. Number 8, let's look at number 8. And we have tizkarna, tizkarna. First of all, we can tell what this is just based on the prefix, it's a tau, and the suffix is a na. Our root here is zakar, to remember. So I can already tell that this is either second feminine plural or third feminine plural, going back to our chart. So we've got third feminine plural, tau, na, tau prefix, na suffix, and then second feminine plural, tau prefix, na suffix. But note that in these cases you've got a holum as your vowel over the second root letter. So that second root letter has a holum. We call that a theme vowel. But here's a case where you've got a patak there.
So we need to come down to section 15.6, state of verbs imperfect, and take a look at that.
And there are certain ones, patak stative, serate stative, and holum stative. And for the patak stative verbs, you'll see that second feminine plural and second or third feminine plural, second feminine plural have a patach as that vowel under the second
root letter or theme vowel. Now, interestingly, the root zakar, so that's zayin, kaf, and resh, meaning to remember, this root is not a stative verb. And so we would expect it to look like this. And notice that we would expect the theme vowel here to be a holum. So we would expect to see tizkorna. But in reality, what we see in the Bible is tizkarna, the 4 places that it appears. And so we will never see tizkorna. But we can still parse this if we check the diagnostics that we looked at earlier. So we said that to figure out a stem, we will look at these middle characteristics, or at least some of these middle characteristics, starting with the prefix vowel. This assumes that there's a prefix, by the way. So we have a prefix. We look at the prefix vowel, R1 doubling, the R1 vowel, and if we need to go farther, R2 doubling, and the R2 vowel or the theme vowel. So for our verb here, we have tizkarna, and our prefix vowel then, which is here, our prefix vowel is a heuric. Then we look at R1 doubling. There is no R1 doubling. The zayin has no dagesh forte, so no R1 doubling. And then we look at the R1 vowel, and that is a silent schwa. So that's a silent schwa. And that by itself, so just these 3 tell us that we have a cal imperfect. So there is a prefix, otherwise we couldn't have a prefix vowel. But then we look at the prefix vowel, R1 doubling, and the R1 vowel, and if they show up to be a heuric, no doubling, and a silent schwa, we know that we have a cal. We don't have to go any farther. So in this case, we have enough information whether the theme vowel is a holum or a patach. We don't really care because we already have enough information to tell us that this is a cal, imperfect. So tizkarna, tizkorna, doesn't make any difference to us. We've already got enough information just from the prefix vowel and the first root letter and its vowel to know that we have a cal. And this is a handy fact about our cal stem. We only want to go as far as we have to parse. And in this case, we only need to go through the R1 vowel and we're done. So we have a cal stem, and then based on the tau prefix and the na suffix, we have cal imperfect
second feminine plural or third feminine plural, and the root is going to be zakar, zayin kaf resh, zakar, to remember. We would translate that as second feminine plural, you plural feminine will remember, or they feminine plural will remember. Okay, let's look at number 9. Here's one we have not seen yet. We've got tick to V, tick to V. So we can see our prefix is tau, and our suffix is this heroic yod. And our root is katav, to write. Okay, so if we look for that pattern,
in section 15.3,
here we find it. You've got the tau
plus heroic
as the prefix and the yod, or the heroic yod, as the suffix. That's a second feminine singular. So we can parse this then as cal imperfect, second feminine singular. Again, I'm not writing those out, but if we were going to write them out, cal imperfect, second feminine singular, and our root is kaf tau bait, katav, to write. So second feminine singular, you feminine will write. And then let's do one more here, one we haven't seen before, number 10. Here we see the aleph is our prefix, no suffix, and our root shavar. This is eshbor, eshbor. The Dagesh Lani there tells us we pronounce that bait hard B.
and the aleph prefix plus the sagol prefix vowel plus the silent schwa R1 vowel.
Going to our chart, that we are looking at a first common singular. So again, we're looking at first common singular, and our root is shavar, sheen, bait, resh, to break. And so we're going to have I will break. So first common singular, I singular will break. The first time we see this root in the Hebrew Bible is in Genesis 19:9, when the people of Sodom press against Lot and they come to break the door down. So the first time we see that, it's a pretty sad situation. So that's enough for parsing imperfects in the strong verbs. Let's look at some translations now. Okay, we're still in the workbook.
Chapter 15 and section Roman numeral 5.
In the Bible translation section. And number 1 comes from Psalm 111:5. And let me read this slowly. Yizkor le'olam barito. One more time. Yizkor le'olam barito. So here we have a nice imperfect, the yod prefix, no suffix, prefix vowel heroic, and R1 vowel silent schwa. And so this is going to be a nice standard cal imperfect third masculine singular. I'm going to parse that just real quickly here. So cal imperfect third masculine singular. And that's zakar, so our root is zakar, Zion, Kaf, Resh, to remember. So we're looking for a possible masculine singular subject, but berit is a feminine noun, so it's not even a candidate. So we would just say that what we have here is he will remember. So we're getting the subject he from the verb itself. So if there's no explicit subject, we find it from the verb. For imperfect and perfect verbs, we can find the subject itself, the pronoun, built into the verb if there's no explicit subject. So he will remember, and then forever, his covenant. We would type that out like this. He will remember his covenant forever. So that's Psalm 111:5. Let's take a look at the next one. This is interesting because the direct objects are front-loading it. We have a direct object and a direct object at the beginning. Usually we see those after the verb, but this time we see them before the verb. Let's just take a look. We have, let me read it here. Et hatzadik wa et harasha yishpot ha-Elohim. Here's our verb. And again, we have this sort of nice standard cal imperfect third masculine singular. The yod prefix vowel hirik, and R1 vowel silent schwa, and no suffix. So same parsing as the one above it. And so I'm not going to write that out, but it's cal imperfect third masculine singular. And shafat is to judge. I will write out third masculine singular because now we're going to be looking for a masculine singular subject. Here we have ha-Elohim. Now, technically Elohim is masculine plural, but when we're talking about capital G God, it often takes, in fact, it almost always takes a singular verb. And it shows that the Hebrews considered this to be a singular subject, that Elohim as capital G God was considered to be singular because it took singular verbs. So we have a subject that matches the verb in this case. Normally a plural doesn't match a singular, but in the case of God it does. And so let's take a look what we have here. We have a direct object marker, et, and then another direct object marker, et. So we have two direct objects of the verb judge, shafat. So we have God will judge. So that's way over here. We have God at the end, and then the verb will judge, and then direct object marker, the righteous and the wicked. So these are adjectives being used like nouns. God will judge the righteous and the wicked. Now let's type those out. God will judge the righteous and the wicked. And those adjectives are being thought of as classes of people. So righteous people and wicked people. Let's look at the next one here from Jeremiah 19:11. So let me read it. Ko amar Adonai Tsevaot kaka eshbor et ha'am hazeh wa et ha'ir hazot. Down in the next line. So it begins with a very standard formula here. Ko amar Adonai, thus says the Lord, and then Tsevaot goes along with that. So thus says the Lord of hosts. We can kind of say now we're looking at quotation marks after this point. This is what he says. I could just put some quotation marks in here, even though obviously There's nothing in the Hebrew text that gives you a quotation mark. And then it tells you kaka means thus. Now let's parse our verb here, because here's our verb. Shavar is the root, and it's got a letter in front, a prefix, so it's the aleph. We can also notice that the prefix vowel is a sagol, the R1 vowel is a silent schwa, and the R2 vowel or theme vowel is a holum. And all these clues are telling us that we have a cal imperfect, first common singular. So cal imperfect, and then first common singular. Shavar is to break, possibly even shatter here. I'm not sure. It kind of depends a little bit on the context. Let's take a look at what's going to get broken. So et, this is our direct object marker. And then ha'am hazeh, so this would be the people, the this, or this people. Wa et ha'ir, direct object marker, and then the city, the this. So this city. Notice that hazeh is masculine because it matches masculine people, and hazot is feminine, it matches feminine city. Probably we're looking at the meaning here of shatter, just based on what's going to happen here. So, thus says the Lord of hosts, thus I will shatter this people and this city. So that's Jeremiah 19:11. Let's take a look at the last one here, which is number 6. It's a relatively longer one, but it's got an interesting feature because it also has a perfect verb in it. And it also has a demonstrative being used as the subject of a sentence. So let me read it. Ki zot habarit esher ekrot et Beit Yisrael acharei hayamim hahem. Down to the next line. Ne'um Adonai natati et torati bekir bam. That's Jeremiah 31:33, that very famous passage about the new covenant in Jeremiah 31:31 through 34. If you're not familiar with that passage, I would get very familiar with it. It's extremely important in terms of the overall story of the Bible. All right, so let's take a look at what we've got here. So ki zot habarit, and then asher, which is which. So it looks like we have for ki zot this, and notice that there is a mismatch here. We have a demonstrative, and it's being used as a pronoun here because it is indefinite, and habarit is definite. It's got a definite article. And so if we wanted to say this covenant, we would say habarit hazot. But now we have the indefinite coming before it, and so this becomes this is the covenant. So it becomes a predicate relationship. We supply the word is in between. So we have this is the covenant which, it's a share, which, and now we have our verb, and this is the same form as we saw above with the aleph as the prefix and then the root coming after it, no suffix. So this is another first common singular. So I'll go ahead and write that in. It's a cal imperfect, first common singular. So I can write that in, a cal imperfect, first common singular. It would be karat, which would be to cut. In the Old Testament, when God initiates a covenant, he is said to cut a covenant. And so we have, this is the covenant which I will cut. And now notice here that we have what could be either a direct object marker or a pronoun. So at, in this case, it got a McCafe after it, so it's going to be a short vowel. That can either be a direct object marker or the preposition with. And we have to decide in context. It looks like here that bereat is acting like the direct object of what I will cut. This is the covenant which I will cut. I'm going to cut a covenant. And so this fits better if we say with, then we have Beit Yisrael. So with the house of Israel. So Israel is a proper name, it's definite, so it becomes the house of Israel. And then Acharei is after. And now we have Hayamim, the days, Hahem. So here we have a demonstrative adjective. Notice they both have definite articles, they match, and Hahem is coming afterwards. So previously we had the demonstrative coming before, and it was indefinite with a definite, and so that showed us that we were looking at a predicate. A pronoun is something. Over here we have a definite article. The demonstrative comes afterwards, and it's also got a definite article. So this is going to be those days. So Haim is it's like a far demonstrative, meaning those rather than these. So we have Hayamim, Haim, those days. And then we come down here. This is a standard formula, Ne'um Adonai, declaration of the Lord, or normally we would translate that, declares the Lord. And then he comes back to what he's saying, and now look, we have natati. Here's our T ending. This is a weak verb in that the final noon gets absorbed, but it's natan, to give. But in this case, notice it's a perfect. So this is Cal perfect 1CS. And the perfect, that T is your 1CS. And it's being used here for future. So the perfect can refer to the future in context. Declares the Lord, and then I will give at, now this is going to be a direct object marker. This is what I'm going to give. Torah T, so that's Torah, singular, plus a pronominal suffix, my law, bikir bam. So this is a pronominal suffix coming after, we have a preposition there, bait, and then we have this noun here, which is kerev. So kof, resh, bait. And it has an accent on the second to last syllable, so kerev. And that just means, well, it can mean entrails, interestingly. It can also mean inward parts. And so in their inward part. So kizot habarit, this is the covenant which ekrot, I will cut with the house of Israel after those days, a declaration of the Lord. I will give, or I will set. Natan can also mean set. I will set my law in their inward part. That's a very famous promise, and it actually looks forward to the Holy Spirit who will indwell Christians and bring God's law into their hearts. Okay, so there is a number of translations. Let me just type this one out so we've got a reference. You could also look up the verse, I guess, but for this is the covenant, which or that I will cut with the house of Israel after those days, declares the Lord, or literally a declaration of the Lord. I will set or give, but I think set's better. I will set my law, singular. It would be toroti if it was plural, but it's torati. It becomes singular. My law in their inward part. I'm not sure if I mentioned that the pronominal suffix here is a third masculine plural pronominal suffix going on a singular noun. So it'd be there. So in preposition, their pronominal suffix, inward part, noun. So there are some translations and some parsing from chapter 15 of the workbook.